been running independent alternative events for over 20 years. Join me and my guests as we share stories and insights into our times working in the unpredictable world of producing events.
He's been in this game for as long as I have, but has put himself in more compromising positions than the Karma-Sutra. People of the universe, please reach for the lasers and praise the one and only Tomas Ford.
Bonjour, konnichiwa, hello.
Tom, my good friend.
We're shaking hands if you can't see that.
So Tom, you and I kind of met a long time ago and started this event's craziness, early thousands. But yeah, I remember meeting you at the old Art Rage office in the city and doing early Art Rage festival things.
Yeah, I think I've met you when I was doing work experience for them, which was mostly free data entry.
Oh, yeah, because... Yeah, free well, I was doing work for the dole, and that was free labour.
Yeah.
So, at least you're comfortable.
Yeah, I ended up having to go to them and say, "Hey, exploit me in a different way," because I'm bored.
But yeah, so they were our early days of dipping our toe into this crazy world of events. But I want to go way back. Tell us about early influences. And before that, where'd you go to school? Where'd you grow up?
Right. So I was birthed in Adelaide, which I don't tell many people, but I've told you now. So yeah, that's that. And then moved here to Perth. Yeah, I went to school in Rockingham for the most part. And grew up down that way. Which was pretty rough at the time.
What year are we talking?
We're talking the 90s. So I graduated high school in 1999.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, pretty much late 90s would be my high school years.
Okay.
And yeah, it was pretty
in
rough.
Rocco?
Yeah, if you're not from Perth, Rockingham's like a Navy base.
It's the edge of town sort of thing.
It's like a country town.
It's on the way down south, though.
Yeah, and it's less like a country town now. In the way that suburban sprawl tends to catch up with things, but it still is one. Yeah, back then it was still very, 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 very much a country town and very rough.
I've grown up in Perth all my life. 70s, 80s, 90s, thousands. But Rockingham was one of those sort of notorious...
Yeah, it's weird though, because it's like, on one hand it's shitty and aggressive and stuff. I mean, lots of country towns are like this as well. Like Albany's like this, where it's like, on one hand it is... beautiful place, right? And there's all these lovely people and you can live this idyllic lifestyle there. And Rockingham is a great place in some ways, because there's bike paths everywhere. You can kind of run around, have lots of independence. But you can also get meth anywhere you want. Yeah. So it's like,
Yeah, I worked in Cervantes a long time in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Same, yeah. Nice little country town, but dig deeper.
Yeah.
There's issues.
Yeah. But it's the same with lots of places like that.
Cool.
And so it's a nice place to grow up, and they did lots of community theatre and lots of because it's a Navy area, so it's like this kind of it's working class, but it's kind of quite affluent working class in a way. So there's kids having lots of opportunities and stuff. It didn't feel like there were many barriers to me doing stuff, which was cool.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So you obviously developed a creative spark. What kind of things did you get up to in high school creatively? Obviously art and things like that. Subjects?
Sort of. I had a terrible art teacher.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, so I ended up pulling out of art and writing her a lengthy letter that she got very upset with my parents about because it went on her file. But yeah, she put me off visual art for years, which was really sad.
Okay.
But I had a great drama teacher, and I was a really drama kid anyway. I was doing lots of drama lessons.
Okay, so you sort of gravitated towards performing arts.
Yeah. Cool. And which when you're a fairly capable performer, and you're a white male in a outer suburban, and sort of because I was going to Mandurah to do community theatre as well, country town kind of theatre scene. You're very in demand, so I got to get a lot of stage time very quickly. I would be doing 3 community theatre shows at once when I was 17, all the time. It would just be I was probably working more as an actor when I was like doing community theatre than I ever have in my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah, because there's
Bit of
just
early success there.
but there's just no blokes,
Right.
and the ones that are there,
You filled a gap.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it didn't matter what my vocal range was. I would be cast like the Nadir was doing. I played the lead, Frederick, the lead hero in Pirates of Penzance, which is not in my vocal range and was not then.
But you fit the...
But I sure squeaked my way through 2 hours. You know, like art and theatre and I guess music in high school. You know that they seem to be more about teaching certain approaches to creativity than they are about the forms.
Yeah.
And so I can see why, for example, you might not like music, but you might go, oh, I like art because it's more about process and it's more
I think also the music section of high school was just so full on, I think. Like, it was pretty strict and I don't know, but that's why they went to fucking Vienna all the time. But yeah, I kind of really floated towards, fine art or art and media.
nice.
Yeah, me and a friend made this Super 8 film of we got space Lego and did a Star Wars. Basically, we had them flying around and everything, and we even scratched lasers into the film, and so yeah. But performing, no.
No, I had a good time though. It was like I really enjoyed it. I ended up really enjoying high school after. I was bullied notoriously and ridiculously, but managed to become kind of like weirdly idiosyncratically popular, like in a you can't fucking touch me kind of way by the end of high school.
Yeah, right.
Like I think it became apparent that I had my own thing going on, which was cool.
Yeah, I got bullied in primary school.
Right.
Yeah.
I got bullied in both, but actually in both cases I was kind of...
But it stopped in high school.
Right.
Like, nothing. But by high school, I'd made friends with the neighbourhood gang.
Yeah.
And we were a gang. And my friends were really tough and protected me. But yeah, funny that I got bullied in primary school and then it stopped in high school. And that says, what does that say, you know?
I don't know.
Children.
Children are crappy. They're crappy things. They're lovely though, as well. But they can be horrible.
Gives you some thick skin. And, resilience, you know.
Yeah, I think in my case it did. It also gave me a very healthy sense of outsiderism that I ended up just building on over the years.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I grew up in a suburb where I was the only Italian kid in my primary school.
Yeah.
Only Italian.
I had a similar thing where I was like just extremely freckly and so visibly Irish.
Right.
Like which wasn't as difficult as being an Italian kid in the 80s or 90s, but yeah, they would definitely go. Yeah.
Oh, I think by the 90s, the racism kind of like mellowed out a bit. That I know of, anyway.
Primary school, the bullying was very focused on the fact that I was an extremely freckly kid.
Right.
By the time I got to like high school, it was more that I was just a very punchable kid.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Wrong aesthetic.
Yeah.
Sorry,
just too much
Tom.
enthusiasm. Too much typical undiagnosed ADHD child.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't even look Italian. It's just that once people found out I was, that's when the game changed. So let's move on from high school into the real world. Yeah. What kind of creative transition did you make independently?
Well, I was trying to get into Whopper to do musical theatre, which thank the stars that I did not.
Thank God you don't have that debt.
Yeah, thank goodness. I ended up going into barely scraping into an arts degree at ECU with my TE score, and then kind of doing drama studies, which was basically just a holding pool for people that would get into Whopper, and then went through that, found this course at Notre Dame in Fremantle that was about devised theatre, group devised theatre, which was all about making your own work and doing your own thing, and that was super duper appealing to me. I'd already made I think it might have been just before I started that course, I made my first solo show. So I did a year of this ECU course, and then I made this solo version of this show called Trip Down the Gutter that I ended up turning into a duo show that I toured with another Perth performer, Shane Adamczak. But yeah, like this embryonic solo show about my experience of going through TE, basically, that I toured around Perth, like for what was then the WA Fringe Festival. Yeah, and that kind of set the tone for everything, really. And then through uni, I was like really trying to be as weird as possible with the stuff I was making, try and push my boundaries a bit. Got into spoken word, got into like, I don't know, started I was in a little band called Descend Here that was around for a bit. And we did okay for a little local band. And then, I was doing heaps and heaps of local theatre stuff. Just lots and lots of different streams of creativity. And then that happened for a few years, graduated uni, and then did that for a few years, built up a bit of a reputation in Perth, which was nice, but was also just doing so many things. It's a bit confusing for people, I think, sometimes. And back then it was very confusing for people because I was not so much... Well, I wasn't, established or anything. I was just...
But you stood out.
Yeah.
And that's the key, right?
Yeah.
Standing out is definitely what you do. And you'll stand anywhere and do it.
Yeah. But yeah, like at a certain point, I had my son, when I was 24, and that kind of made me go, I should probably narrow this down to like one thing to focus on. And I chose this solo performing practice that was the weirdest thing that I was doing at the time, the most uncommercial thing that I was doing. And but I knew that I could build a business out of it in a way that I couldn't build a business out of being an actor in Perth, even if I was going to get one Black Swan theatre show a year or something, or I couldn't be an actor really in this town. Couldn't really be like...
It would be great, but you need that... It's got to fit in somewhere properly.
Yeah, I think... Well, even just the reality of like being a jobbing actor in Perth is there's just not the work.
It's
and
not...
there certainly wasn't in the early 2000s. It was like the only auditions I was getting was for like Bankwest commercials. Like it was a rough thing.
Commercials, and I think they produce kids shows up north or something.
And there was still... Barron Productions was still making things here. But like... Yeah, that was about it. And even that, if you got that would be, 2 years of work? So,
slim pickings, I suppose. Yeah.
So I decided just not to. Also, I was shit at auditions. So it was just like, well, no, I'll just go and make my own thing because then I can slowly evolve it. And what I was doing was running around with punk bands, playing techno and shouting at people and jumping on them. And... over electronic music. And
what was can you remember the first ever gig you booked for yourself to do that kind of...
To do that, well, that kind of evolved through the band I was saying before, Descend Here, and I mean that was through, I was working with a group called the Semikazi Collective, who were like like electronic music collective, a bit like there's a similar thing called Clan Analog in the Eastern States.
I was running Future Shock, which was
parallel,
yes.
Yeah, electronic music kind of regular things.
Yeah.
But Semikazi was this little group. We were like, God, there was just heaps of us all in these different weird electronic bands because electronic music was still really hard to make. So it was mostly coming together and being like, how the hell do we do this? But it was also like, for me, it ended up being this thing where I ended up getting mentored by all of these different people. Some amazing people were in it, like Rolly Skender, who'd been in a band called Circus Murders and was just great solo electronic musician and producer as well. And I've got just heaps of people. Leon Ewing.
Lee Kennedy.
Yeah, Lee Kennedy in Rockingham.
Leon Ewing.
But yeah, Leon Ewing had been in Beaverloop, who were like,
and the other Ewing, who isn't related.
Oh yeah, Andrew Ewing.
Andrew Ewing.
Yeah. But yeah, all of these guys, heaps of others as well. I can't really name them all, but we'd all work together to put these shows on and compilations out and stuff like that. And
that was I want to talk about that time because I was in that thick of it, running Future Shock at the Grosvenor Backroom.
Yeah.
Doing monthly showcases of local electronic producers and DJs. And it was a time where Wham weren't really focused on that.
So Wham, if you're not from Perth, is the WA music organisation.
Yeah. And so there was another. Do you remember there was another gig called Void?
Obviously, yeah.
Wayne.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, but Void was like represented the hardcore side of electronic music, like grindcore, you know, that kind of thing. And we decided to join forces one day and approach Wham and go, we run these, people like it, it should be part of the festival. And so they agreed, you know. It was a nightmare gig.
Yeah.
Just everything that went wrong kind of thing. But we did it, and it was the first. It kind of like prompted the industry to go, oh, there's a scene.
Yeah.
You know, of course there's a scene, you know. So, yeah, that was a little achievement. But that, that time period of electronic music producers in Perth was really exciting. There was a lot going on.
Yeah.
I remember, the original Rackabite Hall being used for a number of electronic music parties, and they started becoming more of a mainstream thing. I remember the Art Gallery of WA opening itself up for Ministry of Sound and things
you
like
had
that.
these big commercial events, and then like even like the stuff that we were doing with the Semikazi stuff, like we'd take over like both the rooms that was 3 rooms, I think, at the Flying Scotsman, which was like the main pub in Mount Lawley, or we took over the Blue Room Theatre, which was a multi-theatre venue in Perth.
Yep.
But yeah, like I mean, you know, then we'd get like Planet Video in Mount Lawley, which was like a big video store at the time, would put a big like window display up for us. And then we'd get like the audiences that we would get would be so diverse, and none of them would know who anyone was, and they'd just go around seeing all this new music. You know?
I remember there was multiple gigs like that going on sometimes in one night, and you could go to bakery, and then there was like just little spaces that would just be activated with little electronic things going on, and it was pretty cool.
It was a good time. I mean, I'm not seeing that kind of the structures for that kind of opportunity and experimentation and audiences to smush into it so organically as they did when I was coming up. So
I think that's correct. It was a time and a place sort of thing, you know, and if you were there, you weren't square.
That's true. I mean, I would play anywhere that I could, so I'd play with all kinds of bands, because you could do that back in Perth in those days. Now it's a bit more, you've got to pitch a lineup, it's got to appeal to a certain crowd, you know, it's got to be a bit more slick. Whereas like back then it would be like, right, well, I'm friends with this new metal band and we're going to just put on a gig at Mojo's because we can. So yeah, I mean, I played Mojo's, Swan Basement and Freo, and then like Heidi, which was a nice punk dive, classic punk dive in North Perth. Lots of places, and just I mean, it was just quite easy to book gigs.
It was,
yeah.
There was plenty of places, and they either suited it or they didn't. I remember Void did a grindcore gig just before the original Rosemount got converted.
Yeah,
and it was still a dive bar at the time. You know, and we just sort of put this grindcore gig on. And it didn't suit the place at all. But
no. Well, that's all right.
You know,
I mean, I used to play. I mean, the Castle was a really big one for me.
Oh yeah,
that was like
that Castle story.
Yeah, the Castle was some guy that had been in a metal band or something had taken this place over.
Yeah,
and he was just
what was his name?
Wayne. And like you get a free. He would
free video,
have a single camera, like low resolution digital camera over the head on the stage. So you would end the show and he would give you this burnt DVD of what you'd just done, which in my case would be an empty stage because I'd be running around the audience. But that time was great because it was a converted, it used to be called the Blarney Castle back in the 90s.
Yeah, and that's where,
like,
in the 70s, they used to hold a gig there called Dirty Dick's.
Right.
And Dirty Dick's was a theme restaurant.
Right.
And it was all about wenches and drinking out of horns.
Yeah,
you know?
But Blarney Castle was that too. It was Irish themed.
Yeah.
And I had so the castle had this proscenium arch stage with curtains.
Yes.
So I used to do all kinds of shit there because it was like doing a community theatre show. I'd be able to start with the curtains closed and then open them up and then there were still props from when it had been other things.
Oh yeah, I do remember.
So, like,
some wrought iron.
There was a coffin that I loved using. So it would just be this ridiculous thing, and it ended up being, because I'd be friends with so many different bands that would play there. I would play there like almost like it would be at least once every 2 weeks that I was playing at the castle. To the point that like at one point he ended up trying to get me, like he booked me for a month of lunchtime shows where they tried to do like the worst pub food menu ever, and had like me in 2003 or 4. So like I was performing as Tomas Ford's Cabaret of Death, and my show was calibrated, really to work well in between as like being able to play between skinhead bands if I needed to, with my little gay disco party. So not really for lunchtime.
Hey, try new things.
Yeah. But that didn't last very long, but like was just a hilarious thing to happen.
So you can talk about it now.
Yeah.
I do remember the castle. I had a run in with Wayne because I screened a film there, and I took a projector, and it was gone.
Oh, right.
And I had to get the police involved because it belonged to TAFE.
Right.
And then I had the cops come to my place and pull him and his dodgy mates' mugshots up from the 80s. And I had to go, it's them, but they're younger, but it's definitely them, And nothing came out of that, but it was a bit of an unnecessary drama. But I do remember the castle. It had a weird vibe.
Yeah.
It had a weird vibe, and
but it was so important, because there's other spaces like people always
they let you run amok.
Yeah,
like the Heidi used to let us run amok.
Yeah, because people, when they remember my shows from those days, tend to be like, I remember seeing you at the castle. I remember seeing you at the bakery. I used to play there quite a bit as well. But it's actually like the stage time I had in the castle.
Oh well, let's talk about the bakery, because talk about like having free creative license. Yeah, to do almost anything.
Well, it was great. So the bakery was this multi-purpose art space that Outrage, who run the Fringe World Festival, used to run. God, it's a great space, big, massive black box kind of venue. At first, they tried to run it as they'd have a theatre down the side, gallery on the other side.
It was split up into 3 rooms.
Yeah, which was shit. No one had thought about sound blades. So I used to put theatre shows on in the small space and music shows in the other space. But when I put theatre shows on, bands would be sound checking in the middle of yeah, which was actually okay in the case of at least one of those shows. There was a show I did called Tom Paine, which I was a solo show that was a long absurdist script, it's a UK show, and I could not. I hadn't realised I had ADHD at this point, and I could not remember that script to save my life. So opening night, I was having panic attacks. The director wouldn't let me have any reminders on the stage or anything. I got completely lost in this script. And this show that's supposed to be an hour and a bit ended up being, I think it was 22 minutes.
A mini show.
Yeah, and everyone was fine with it because it didn't make less sense than the original show.
Yeah, so many of us cut our teeth at the bakery.
Yeah.
And we're allowed to do it. It was you basically you had to be risque. Well, not had to, but it was encouraged.
Yeah, and the thing about it as well is that it was again not so focused on financial bottom line stuff. You could put on a gig there,
it was community,
have it be a bit of a flop, and talk to them about it and explain. They were aware that there were other outcomes involved other than
they took the risk.
Yeah, and they knew what they were doing. It's yeah, and they would do some pretty wild things. I had a CD launch on Good Friday one year, which was pretty good.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It was the only licensed venue apart from the casino in town.
Oh.
They had a very specific kind of liquor license that no one else obviously had, and so they were able to open on Good Friday, which
and pour drinks.
Yeah, which was a risk because sometimes if people's wallets aren't out to go out, then sometimes it doesn't matter. Putting on gigs in between Christmas and New Year's is a bit like that. But it paid off, baby. It was the weirdest crowd.
Yeah.
But they paid.
They paid. But that was a unique time and venue. It gave a creative, artistic license to so many people.
Yeah.
I was there just as... I think we almost lived there.
Yeah.
I got very involved with the bakery, and up until its closing, I was in a musical, the brainchild of Rolly Skender. And I was in a musical, and we played a live performance of the soundtrack to the film "Oh Brother, We're Out There."
Right.
And it was part of Fringe, and then they asked us to close the bakery, like, for good. And so that was pretty significant for me.
Yeah, nice.
Closing it like that, and there was like 300 people.
Yeah, cool.
So definitely ended that era. I laid the concrete in the driveway down there. I'd sort of fixed all, They got the Italian to do the concrete.
Yeah, I mean, that work experience that I did, I ended up becoming their lighting person for the first time that they opened.
I learned a lot about production.
But it also, weirdly gave me, the... So the person that I ended up being, assigned to was Trevor, whose surname I can't remember, who was the head technician at the bakery. And he was also used to be the touring technician for the Doug Anthony All-Stars.
Oh.
Trevor. I ended up getting all these stories from him about the Doug Anthony All-Stars, which really normalised a lot of the behaviour that I was doing. But also made a lot of things seem really possible.
Sure.
Yeah.
They were great.
Yeah. And I was just a bit too young for what they were doing, but all through high school I'd been compared to Paul McDermott, because I looked like a young version of Paul McDermott.
Okay.
When I started to look less punchable. And in year 12, I discovered I could sing, so it became a thing. But I was way too young for the Doug Anthonys, but they were just conceptually ended up being this huge influence. And then, especially through Trevor's stories of just what horrible assholes they were to him as a tech. They would just unplug their mic and then just be like, oh, it's gone, and he would have to walk through the theatre, and then they'd just plug it back in.
Oh, okay.
It's just yeah. But that they started from Canberra, and they were doing musical comedy, and ended up being taken seriously globally as
I remember their TV show.
Yeah,
it was great. And then that they had Flacco.
Yeah.
In it, and Sandman.
Yeah, totally.
And this is a time where Triple J was awesome.
An actual thing. Actually had an understanding of their curatorial responsibility for developing new acts. Yeah.
That, and just balls.
Yeah,
well.
just
big balls.
Yeah. Demonstrably better on multiple metrics is how I would put it. Because I hate talking in abstracts about Triple J, because it always gets down to, but you're old. But it's no. Demonstrably better on multiple metrics of audience and musical development.
Content,
but the content was built from structure of that curatorial impulse and the things that they put in place that they're still writing now, Unearthed and stuff. But sorry, I can talk about that for days.
But I agree. No, I agree. And it was an influence to what we did, Everyone looked forward to listening to Triple J in the morning.
Well, it was actually where I saw myself going as well, because back then we had, the Doug Anthonys had been on Triple J, and associated stuff had been with that. There'd been Machine Gun Fellatio, Regurgitator, Tism. Those kinds of bands. And we had, at the same time as I was starting, so Electroclash was happening in Germany with Peaches and Chicks on Speed and this kind of underground kind of electro stuff that I was as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm that.
That's it.
Never went to Berlin like a fucking idiot. Because the world seemed so big then.
That's true.
Seemed impossible. Now it'd be like, oh, fuck, of course I'm going to Berlin. But the thing was that there was already so much context. Even crap like Sonic Animation and stuff. Australia had these mainstream electronic acts.
They did.
That had a subversive, underground, satirical element to them. And that was very much where I saw myself going.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, my timing career-wise was right when Triple J decided it didn't want to play that shit anymore.
Yeah.
Like about 2000 and the early 2000s, they didn't want to be that anymore.
They totally flipped over.
Yeah.
They went from one thing to an extreme of another.
Well,
and they stopped being provocative, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they just had less room for... I cannot... Like, whereas in the late 2000s, you would, like for example, go through the Hottest 100 and be like, oh, look at these novelty songs, right?
Yeah.
And really, like, that's the kind of stuff that, like, because my stuff is very conceptual, it's essentially, if it's going to get on the radio, it's going to be as a novelty song. And then they just stopped playing novelty songs in the 2000s. The whole cultural space that I'd been in just disappeared, right?
Yeah, it's true.
And so I was, like, showcasing... trying to get meetings with Triple J, and like I was doing actually very well in the music space. Like, yeah, I played every music festival in Perth at the time. I was doing Big Sound, Fuse, like musical festival, like similar kind of
I think you played every venue in Perth at least. Yeah,
and it got to a point where I definitely had a potential for a musical career, and it just. If I was in the East Coast, I think the evidence of the following that I had would have been clearer to people and stuff, but it just wasn't like from here.
Timing is everything, really,
yeah.
and but
it was a really good time. So I started that went on a little bit of a rant.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm really glad it did because it was exceptionally fucking cool.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I was there.
But yeah, I mean, like, because kind of when that it became clear that cultural space wasn't there to aim at, I had to start looking at what else I was going to do.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's just a smart thing to do. Like, I went into music and film. You know, film festivals in winter, music festivals in summer.
Yeah.
I was a freelancer for 10 years or something, just one festival after the other, you know, and then running my own stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we resonate in that way where we're not just one thing, we're more than two things or three things, and spread ourselves out for more opportunities and things like that.
Yeah.
But not everyone can do that, and not everyone wants to do that. So,
well, I think one of the things about working in arts or events in Perth though is that you kind of have to do that. I mean, like there are people that work in they might go and work for specific companies, but even that's for generally a relatively short time period. And even people on the marketing or admin or that working in very specific roles, they'll end up having to cross over into all kinds of other spheres because it's not like a larger market where you can specialize like that as much, like with the possible exception of some publicists and stuff like that. Like it's like even if even people that I have thought were bedded into their roles forever, eventually like their events company folds because this is a risky market. I mean, before COVID we had just an endless wave of events companies kind of closing in this town anyway.
Well, yeah. Some major ones like the Big Day Out.
Yeah, Big Day Out. Sunset Events closed.
Sunset Events, yeah.
Jump Climb Events, who I was working with, closed.
On that note, let's talk about flops and frustrations. I probably have the longest list of those.
Yeah.
But it's it's the nature of the game, isn't it? You take risks.
Yeah.
And you deal with the consequences, and the consequences are either good or bad.
Yeah, well, that's it. And I mean, the risk. The problem is that depending on what you're doing, but even when you're doing commercial work, you don't really have the reserve of capital that you might have in other industries. So when you have a flop, like it has a much larger impact in this industry, also because you're usually playing with your own money than it would if you were, say, in the startup space or in a different...
So here's something. What's the difference between an independent event and a corporate event?
What?
One has a safety net.
Yeah. But also, you get to do what you want. And, I've lost money on things that have, because I felt really bad. I used to measure my success financially, even though I was really artistically driven and I wouldn't compromise on that. Because I had a family and I had just I was living on a poverty line wage. I was like really driven, but like really embarrassed by the amount of money that like some of my events would generate. And it took me a really long time to realise that actually that outcome was ridiculous to be the metric that I was measuring everything on.
Sure. It's a factor, but not,
Yeah.
But in your case, I mean, you had a family. So the level of importance of income is higher than...
And like, don't get me wrong, like I've had an extremely uncompromising artistic career. So these two ideas have existed in parallel. But like, I'm studying an MBA at the moment, and when I look at that kind of thinking that I had, it's old-fashioned thinking.
It is.
Even on a corporate level, that's not the way they look at the world now. They look at triple bottom line. And
when I started, making money or being paid properly, being paid, and it was like that little hurdle you have to, like, all of a sudden you have to be, savvy about what you're worth, and your value, and that kind of thing. And I remember it always being a tricky subject, and then I just got over myself and went, no, I'm worth this much. But it took a bit of time to figure out that, especially in the early days. But now we can fling an invoice in 2 seconds.
Yeah, I mean, even so, it's pretty hard. I mean, like, the amount of... I get really annoyed at council arts workers in particular, if any are listening, who ask me to quote them, sight unseen with no price range. So now I ask them for a range that they're willing to work within at the start of the negotiation, because it's really unfair. Like, some councils that you work with will have a budget of like $500 at most, right? And you might have nothing on that weekend, and that might be $500 you weren't going to have. Some councils, like, let's say you're working in the Pilbara, all of a sudden there's a lot of fucking money floating around. I mean, sometimes more than that, man. Like,
I know.
It's and if you don't know that range, and there's no real way to do the research around that negotiation, because particularly in the art side of events, but probably also in the events side of events, people are not particularly collaborative.
You raise a really important point there.
One of the things I realised when the pandemic hit, because like Western Australia had been, on the subject of flops, I had focused on building up international markets. I had a really good following in New Zealand and the UK, and starting to get one in Malaysia and the east coast of Australia. And Perth had become my worst market for about 2 years. And so when the pandemic hit, I realised that I had been giving mates rates to absolutely fucking everybody in this town. And I've managed to pull back from that now to the point where things are much, much better here. But like, it's... But part of it was that the expectation for local performers and arts workers was that we would just want the work. And whereas when I come into spaces as a touring artist, there's a different understanding, and it makes me cringe and feel a bit yuck when I come across that locally, actually.
Yeah, look, I've dealt with my fair share of councils as well, and most of the time you're just... you're dealing with ordinary people that don't have these, that don't understand, the creative part or anything like. They're just in that job.
Yeah, it's a real pity. I think it's okay as well. Like, sometimes it's okay, but
people should know what they're paying for.
Yeah, they should. But not knowing isn't an excuse for not developing your literacy in that space either.
Yeah, but I really like that point you brought up about what range of pay, because that's something that just people ask you, how much do you want? So, well, how much do you have?
And the thing is, like, you get this response from your average council arts worker who maybe doesn't understand the arts very well, like a bit baffled that a supplier has asked them this, and like, with the implication being that you don't know how to behave professionally, right? But if you are listening, just bash through that, because they are behaving unprofessionally. Their job, as particularly as a council arts worker, is to facilitate a local ecosystem and to build local capacity. And so actually, that they have an onus to make sure that you are able to operate in a sustainable way.
Yeah.
So they should be giving you that information.
Yeah. Look, at the end of the bloody day, even with, grants and things like that, it all really depends who's sitting around that table.
Oh, yeah.
And I've sat at that table, and I've been the only one at that table that knows what they're talking about, you know. And it's good to get different perspectives, Yeah. But you really need, you need more than just ordinary people making these kind of decisions.
Absolutely.
But not only just making those decisions, it's like spending money on worthwhile projects that are going to, succeed. And yeah.
You're getting into my favourite rant topic here.
Yeah.
Because my favourite rant topic is the lack of arts specialty in decision-making processes in the arts.
Yeah.
Particularly with boards and stuff like that. We're seeing lots of corporatisation of boards. And it's, most arts boards don't have artistic representation on them. And that's insane because of the complexity of the space, and the difficulty of the issues. And, even if you're not in the arts and you're listening to this for the first time, I think even from what me and Ivan have been talking about, you can kind of go, oh, actually, this space is so different and difficult to engage with. The rules are different than in any other form of business. That to not have that input is fucking wacky, man. I mean, one of the problems I had during the pandemic is that a lot of venues have bookers at the moment who are very green in this town.
Oh,
yeah. And I mean no offence to anybody at all when I say that, if you're listening, but just that. So what I do is a bit hard to market, but I can market it very well. But if you're a new person who hasn't really been au fait with what I do, and I have to convince you of it, it's really uphill struggle. So I was struggling to even book shows here, even though Perth had events open. And yeah,
I know what you're talking about. I do all my own marketing.
Yeah,
I do it to stand out.
But
and to be, you offer a unique experience and all that, and so do you. You offer a unique experience as well.
I'm a cult artist,
Yeah,
and I think
I'd agree with that.
It can be hard to understand that from a more
ordinary point of view,
traditional point of view. Yeah, but the kind of marketing that I do is really above and beyond what the other acts that most venues will work with will do.
Yeah,
there's a lot of I'm aware that I'm marketing to a smaller audience, so it's a very involved mailing list. It's a lot of socials. It's a lot of really targeted.
But you have a standout. You have a standout image when you market. I just thought, that's the way you do things. You do things in your own unique stamp.
What's brand building?
But there is a big cut and paste culture.
Yeah,
everything's a template now. And. I'm not going to...
Well, I think the thing is, for me, I come from a DIY background, a punk background, but I also have a really strong understanding of branding and of marketing, and I think, you've got to build an idiosyncratic brand that just sticks out. And one of the things, we haven't talked about it very much, but most of the things I was doing before the pandemic was working in the fringe festival space, which is it's like a small business incubator for artists, really, because it forces you to differentiate your product and to really claim out a brand space and to ruthlessly run your business into efficiency, because the margins are so slim that you really actually have to become really good at the fundamentals of small business while you're doing it. But the branding side of it is so important. Because in that space, so this show that I have, Crap Music Rave Party, that I've been able to turn into, an international hit nightclub event thing. Yeah. It emerged initially as essentially an excuse to play music to people and get people to buy me house wine at a venue in Adelaide. But over subsequent iterations at festivals, it developed a branding because each time I put it on, I had to tighten it up. I had to get more cut through, or there was more risk involved. So I had to make sure that a certain marketing, the marketing was definitely hitting niches. So then I had to research about how to do niche marketing and how to bring my audience from other earlier appearances at different places with me, and really data driven marketing, I guess. But that stuff's important. But it's interesting to me as well that like in the arts and events space, like we are really fucking good at this stuff. Not all of us, but like some of this, like, you know, like that stuff is actually kind of, like I say, pretty natural. And yeah, like, I mean, I mentioned I was studying this Masters of Business before, and it's like I'm really fucking good at it, which was a shock to me. And it really reinforced something that I've been saying to people for years. You know, producers who are experienced in doing events or theatre shows or music, you know, if they're working in that space for a long time, it is such a complex and difficult environment with such huge pressures that it really sharpens you up to like into actually incredible small business people.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I went and did a diploma in marketing communications and a diploma in event management. Yeah, and then there's sort of that tricky area where you upskill,
yeah,
and no one else does.
That's
sort
the
of
thing. Yeah, like you're professionalizing, but meanwhile you're dealing with. I mean, one of the most complex things that the arts and events industry people have to deal with is that a big part of our workforce is either unpaid or really lowly paid, including us. But like when I'm working on problems at uni around HR and stuff like that, remuneration is a factor that we can talk about. In the arts and events, we don't really have that as a lever for motivation as much. Because there's usually no money.
Want to go into detail about that?
Yeah, well, like, I mean, particularly in WA, you know, I'm at uni with, you know, the people that I'll be having, you know, working on group projects with and stuff are from the mining sector or from some defence contractors, but various kind of corporate backgrounds. There's, like, it just basically comes down to the fact that most industries have money. And the arts over a really long period of time has been, you know, we've had our funding stripped away from us, but also there's been this move towards institutionalisation of our structures, which means that the DIY space has been removed as well. So there is never any fucking money.
Unless you work for a corporate company that has a budget.
Yeah. But and like even then your company may still be running on scraps. I mean, like...
Sure.
There's a move in, you know, any corporate kind of company situation, HR, will try and find a means of motivation that isn't financial before they try and up your pay, right? But at least they've got that in the background. Like, and actually, the way that most of those other levers can even work is because, and I mean, this is my opinion here, is because you've got the backing of the fact that they could lead to a pay rise. Like you might get like a additional responsibilities, or you might get like these other perks, or you might get all these other things. But actually, like in the worker's mind, they're a step towards a pay rise. These small increments of recognition mean that their conditions may improve in a realistic way.
Right.
Whereas in the arts, we don't have that.
No.
And often we can't even fucking pay anyone.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can't even feed people.
Yeah.
So like we're doing motivation on hard mode all the time.
Yeah.
And the levels of varying professionalism that you're talking about are a people management problem that people who work in other industries have almost never encountered.
No.
Like, because what we have to do in the arts is balance, you know, even startup people will be like, you know, never go into business with your friends, right? In the arts, you are always in business
you
with
need your friends.
Like, your friends are the only people that are going to do free labour for you.
Yeah.
You know, and
come to your gig.
Or come to your gig, or even be interested enough in what you're doing to be involved in it.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and the thing is, if you weren't friends with them before, by the end of it, it's been so fucking traumatic that you're friends now. So you're always in business with your friends. You've got to manage that separation of friendship and business.
Yeah.
But you've also got to manage these different levels of professionalism and people's self-perceived professionalism. So like they might have high or low experience, but their self-perception of whether they have high or low experience, you've got to indulge that, and you've got to manage that. It's a real puzzle. But you like, because that to me mirrors my experience of the arts in general, where my expectation, having worked in curatorial roles one of the billion things I've done is run large fringe theatre venues with multiple theatres and stuff. And as part of that, you're curating essentially like an arts festival within an arts festival. And so as part of that role, I would see my responsibility to be finding new artists and supporting new artists, and to be seeking out work, and to be making sure that you're nurturing the scene as a whole, because you've put yourself in a position of some cultural power when you do that. And it fascinates me when like anybody working in any kind of programming or events role doesn't understand that that's what their role is as well. That even musicians should be doing this. You see nice, good musicians do this, where you see the people coming out kind of around you, and you pull them in, and by pulling them up, you pull yourself up, I think. But yeah, like it's and then on the individual level, like you're talking about there, it's like that's just, people have this idea that working in the events or the arts could be a nice thing, and they don't really think beyond that as to like a kind of societal contribution sometimes, I think, in the way that you're or I might. But I think you see that in all kinds of arts. I don't think that's new particularly. Like, for example, when I studied devised theatre, and I was there wanting to make my own work and to do all that stuff, I was studying with a lot of people that would have rather be in the acting stream at Whopper, who wanted to be on Home and Away, Or you even see them musicians. Like, I think with musicians, it's more visible. So there's a thing that happens when you're a musician where you're around for long enough that other musicians that are around for long enough start to notice that you're a lifer, and that you just keep doing it. And that, because at a certain point you start to realise that not everyone gets into music for the same reason, and that some people get into it because they want to go and achieve specific ego-related goals that either get done with really quickly or that don't happen, and then they're out, right? But for some of us, it's something that is just that the journey is the destination, right? And after a certain period of time, like recognises like with that kind of stuff, I think. But it's, motivation isn't intrinsic, either. That's something that I learnt at uni, in HRE kind of stuff. Where this kind of thing, this drive that you have to go and do stuff or to support people, or that's an intrinsic motivation.
You're right.
And that comes from circumstance and upbringing and genetics and all kinds of other shit.
It does.
That you cannot actually, it was actually a mind-blowing moment for me, because I'd always pursued a kind of leadership that was inspirational, I guess, that I could maybe inspire that kind of enthusiasm in other people, and you can't.
No.
It just doesn't work that way. And I was like, oh, that makes so much sense. Because actually what you need to do is structure things for people so that they understand directly what the positive for them is, what the transaction... you have to approach things in a more transactional way for most people, because that's the way that most people view the world.
Yeah, look, I think, working with people is an art in itself, you know, and the more people you work with, in my experience, I can read someone quite well now. Yeah. Not being judgmental or anything, but you can tell if this is going to be a smooth process or a clunky process or a process at all, But I think that insight's good, because otherwise going into things without clear communication, that's always been an arts thing as well. And I knock that on the head these days. Everyone's got a PDF with all the information on it, and you sign a release form or whatever. Everyone's under contract with me now. And it's not a control thing; it's a communication thing.
I had this horrible thing that happened to me during a crowdfunding webcast I did a couple of years ago, where all the people that I was working with, so I was doing this webcast in a car in my driveway, and all the people that I was working with were in my house bitching about me, which I found out about later. And I had been working my fucking ass off to try and create opportunities for these folk, and so it was really hurtful to me. But once I got over the ego bruise, like, it was a real kind of teachable moment for myself of like, well, actually, if they're perceiving that they've put in all of this labour, right, and I have a way of, spitballing with people, and I'll help them develop ideas and that kind of thing, and people who aren't used to me can sometimes perceive that as an agreement, like, we've spitballed an idea,
right,
and therefore we are doing this, and a lot of that had happened, and so it was like, whereas actually I had viewed it as more, actually we're a bunch of people, I'm doing cool stuff and you can come for the ride, and then we can develop your skills, and I do help people out. I put a lot of energy into making sure things happen for other people, but it's not linear. No. And like when you don't manage people's expectations, you are accidentally letting them down all the time.
I think back and all the things I did without agreements, you know, and it was all built on trust, basically. Totally. Yeah. That your friend was going to turn up on time and do this, and it usually worked.
And it kind of comes back to what we were saying before, about like the negotiation stuff as well, where and the kind of the people management stuff, where you're like, I want to make sure that my relationships are okay, and I want to make sure that like I'm not the asshole in this situation. But actually, like, if you've got to take a wider view than that, I think you come to learn over time. Take a wider view that like actually, like, in the way that like a parent doesn't always act in ways that children immediately like. You have to protect everybody in the situation. You have to be quite paternal, because otherwise everybody is just going to end up like fucking each other in a bad way.
All right, but let's talk about victories and milestones.
Yeah, I mean, like, again, like, like all of these things are tied together. That like my career has been a lot of success that's then failed and then pointed the way to something else. So I mean, when Noodle Palace failed, it pointed the way for me. I'd already started doing Edinburgh Fringe, and my DJ show Crap Music Brave Party had started getting a following there, but I had to go like, oh shit, well what now? Because like I had been drawing like a bit. It was a small stipend. It was like, I can't remember how much it was. It was like the bare minimum to live on stipend from the Noodle Palace days. But I had this show, Crap Music Rave Party, that was starting to do some stuff. At that point, I'd done some touring with it, and I had just enough success with it at fringe festivals that it was successful in those contexts. And I was like, well, what do I do? And then I really started hammering it at the Edinburgh Fringe, and it became a really big show there. I guess that like building, I look at what I was able to do in Edinburgh as one of my biggest things for me, because when I went the first time, it was so speculative. It was like, I was nearly 30. I just wanted to go to Europe before I was 30. And so I got the shittiest venue. I did it as cheap as I could. I crowdfunded a couple of $1,000, and I had an amazing time. I got this award nomination for cabaret, which was a genre that I didn't even know I did. And it was great. And then it was harder after that, because the first impact, you've got to really build on that. But then the third year I was there, we did Crap Music Rave Party. Sorry, the fourth year. No, it was the third year I was there. We did Crap Music Rave Party as a late night show. And my mum was there that year, and she did my front of house for me, which was amazing. We did this second level of this shitty pub on because of the pandemic, I haven't been to Edinburgh for long enough. Like, I can't remember. Cowgate. On Cowgate. So if you've been to Edinburgh, listeners, Cowgate is like the street in Edinburgh that goes down through it's like the little road / plague canal where it has like all the little cave venues off it. And so I was upstairs in this second floor classroom sized space with 100 people dancing. My mum doing the door, who was carefully counting people going home because she was having conversations with every drunken Scottish person there.
Sure.
So she knew who was in and out. So we were selling actually double capacity over the night because we could, without being a risk at all.
Yeah.
And it ended up just being this massive cult hit. The next year I moved up to 150 space. We sold it out almost every night. That year I did Tuesday through Sunday shows, 3-hour shows, as well as a solo show, because I needed to maintain my artistic career as well as this clowning DJ thing that I was doing.
Yes.
And then, it built up and became this, I ended up being maybe one of 2 people in the world that has ever made significant amounts of money at the Edinburgh Fringe, right? And I mean, with the ups and downs, right?
Sure.
So and then at the end of 7 years of that, my ego got the better of me. I decided to go with one of the big exploitative venues there, who buried the show because it was competing with their late night show, who charged me so much rent that it was ridiculous. And I lost somewhere in the vicinity of 20,000 Australian dollars, which for me was an enormous amount of money. And that stopped me from going to Edinburgh for 2 years, and then the pandemic happened. So now I'm like, oh God, it's been 4 years. But I still have a presence there. I don't know, I'm really proud of that. And that became an engine that drove my ability to take that show and all my other shows to other places. So I ended up being able to do all these other fringe festivals, which, are an easy way to tour because they're a good way to test out a new market without having to deal with visa issues.
Oh, okay.
So most fringe festivals, except for the USA ones, have visa-free status. So it's actually the only real reason that you would ever fucking do them, because they're nightmare things.
Sure.
But so I've been able to do stuff dip my toe in the Czech Republic, for example.
Right.
That was my gateway into the New Zealand market in Wellington.
You were doing a fair bit of travelling.
Yeah, up till the pandemic, because I'd also had a whole other story. I became mainstream virally popular with internet content in Malaysia, doing Malaysian language parody songs. Very long story, but between Malaysia and I was doing a bit of work there. New Zealand became my biggest market. So I was touring there often 2 weekends of a month. The UK, I was popular in very specific places. I could go and do Brighton and sell it out. I could do Edinburgh. And it was starting to spread to the point where, I was adding things like Manchester and other things were starting to come up. London, there's a cabaret scene there that my weird stuff really fits into. So the UK was starting to spread out, but it meant that I was always travelling all the time.
It was big expenses.
Yeah, it meant that my business was really marginal because Richard Branson was taking all my money. But also, I'd managed to make this amazing. The pandemic was actually, in a way, a little bit of a relief, particularly once JobKeeper came in, because I'd managed to make this career that I built for myself.
Yeah.
Desperately unhappy because I wasn't just travelling. I was trying to balance. At that point, my son was, going through the early teens, trying to balance that. So I'd be doing New Zealand on weekends and coming back on the Monday and then flying out again on the Thursday. That's not good. So, the pandemic has been a bit of a reset of me going I don't want to, even though that was awesome, and I'm super proud that I built everything to that point, and I want it back. I've got to make it on my terms.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, it's just smoother.
Yeah,
that's about. Yeah, for me, it's I want a smooth execution, smooth delivery, and a smooth wrap up.
Well, it's it's 2 things for me. It's like, we're talking about motivation before, self-motivation, self-management in that. Like, my motivation became really low because, there wasn't the remuneration. I wasn't getting that kind of kick that FIFO workers get where they come home and buy a jet ski.
Sure.
Yeah. So I was having a bad time, and I actually need to manage myself better in that way. But, like, also, like, it's one of the reasons I started, like, so through the pandemic, I've been doing this MBA part-time. But one of the reasons I started was because I realised I hadn't been able to scale that business on any level. I hadn't been able to get staffing in to support me, or really, it was still really the same DIY operation that it had been before. I was working with a lot of contractors, but contractors are, if you've got even a publicist, right, that they're not in your workforce. So 3/4 of your time, therefore, is spent replacing that publicist most of the time. Trying to find a good publicist, and in my case, one that can actually understand what I'm doing and speak the language of what I'm doing. It's hard. So it
it becomes an evolutionary thing where you do this up until this point, and now you go, all right, we need to bring people in to make things run smoother and just expand as well, But that, I think that it had been an unacceptable situation for me for a while, and the pandemic, it actually needed something drastic to happen for me to step back and go, right, how do I reshape this? Because, and now that I've had the pandemic, I mean, I had thought that I was just going to go and, I don't know, do some other kind of work or something after the pandemic, but I think now it's like, no, wait, I've got all of this stuff, I've got all of these assets, and I can actually build this back up. It's just, I've got to be careful about how I do it. I've got to, like, if I've got to bake staffing levels into projects so that, like I'm never doing a project where it's me just running the entire thing. I'm not the manager and the project manager. Like, I am, like, yes,
it's hard enough being the artist. I
completely understand. You and I have been a one-man band thing for a long time,
and it's hard to get out of.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've gotten used to it, and I'm the, like I accepted the fact a long time ago that I have a bit more motivation and other things than other people, and so I'll just do it. Yeah. It's easier if I just do it. Yeah. And I was like, I'll just do it, and there's no complaints. It's just that I'm good at it, and I'll do it, and I'll do it quick, and I'll do it.
But that's a classic false economy of, like. Sorry, it's a really convoluted sentence way of saying it, but I was going to say, that's a classic false economy of micromanagement, right? Like, because when you're doing that, you're getting the task done in the short term, right?
Yes.
But you're actually not building up your capacity.
No.
So, you need, like, if you spent that time teaching somebody and building up their ability to work autonomously, then your capacity would be built for the long term. Yeah. It's a bit like renting versus mortgaging, right? Sure. Yeah.
But it's also a logistical thing as well. Like, it's like, why is this taking so long?
Yeah. And, and
done.
Particularly, I think, you and I work in similarly cult kind of aesthetics. Yeah. And I don't think that it's impossible to contract that out. But no, it's just a case of like being, when you relinquish control of something, you have to be willing for it to be a collaborative process. And
look, terms and conditions apply for everything, you know. But let's so
sorry, I can rant.
No, so can I. Pandemic fucked a lot of us up. Yeah. I was about to relaunch. I was about to re-blossom. I'd just been through a world of shit, and I was halfway through an events management diploma, and an opportunity to collaborate with a pop culture convention that'd been established for a few years and were growing very well, and had a meeting with them about doing a screen culture collaboration. Went to the venue, had the whole thing. It was all going to be awesome. Sick. Then the C-bomb happened. Yeah. And I literally had all the marketing done. I'd done everything except for program the event, but I had the venue. I knew what I was going to do here. I had the whole thing. And it was all in a report for my course as well, you know. So the planets were all aligning, you know. And then the C-bomb happened, and unfortunately that little pop culture convention had to fold in the end. So for me, it kind of really stopped me in my tracks, and I resorted to just creating music and just being productive.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until 2021 where I established myself in a completely different home and everything, and got a grant through the local council to do George Méliès. And that was a turning point for me because I'd been out of events for 5 years. I went into disability services, had enough of that, wanted to get back into events. Didn't know anyone anymore, sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, like a lot of people left Perth.
Yep.
And there was a lot of brand, new generational thing going on, and I just didn't know anyone anymore. And there was some people I just, that just aren't around anymore.
Yeah.
So I decided to get diplomas to strengthen, to enhance my skills and get back into the industry. But when I was when my grant came through for George Méliès rescored, I applied all my skills, and I basically just approached it completely differently, more structural, but also I got to choose my own team, and I could pay them.
Yeah.
And everyone was brilliant.
Yeah.
I didn't have any issues with anyone because I knew a lot of them over, a period of time. And, they had good work ethic. They could deliver good work, and they just knew how to roll, and we all kind of rolled the same way because we've been rolling for a long time, But it was such a fresh breath of air, just being able to choose my own team and manage them virtually. We had one meeting here in the beginning of the project, and then from then on, we didn't see each other until the gig.
Yeah, right.
And I learned to work virtually, which I found pretty easy.
Yeah.
If the people on the other end are savvy as well, but most people are now, But just, sending information instantly and, and prompting people with little gifts and things like that. There's all these little different ways of communication. I love gifts. Gifts are my thing. Gifts came in very handy for George Méliès because they already existed. I didn't have to make them. You just typed his name in and all these little gifts came up. So I used them as a marketing strategy. Yeah, and for food for thought. But it was a real, and then the work that was delivered was just exceptional. I bought Mike on as a Digitech manager, and he goes beyond his duty, and it all just came together really well. Was sold out, made some money, and that was it, So that for me was a milestone in getting something. I hadn't kind of done that thing before as well, but pure and utter confidence all the way. Yeah. And it just sort of showed me that it's possible, can be done. Yeah. And this is the way to go.
Because I had a similar thing where I was working on, I'd started an online streaming platform, basically taking my expertise in running fringe theatre venue programs and trying to apply it to a Netflix for fringe comedy, right? Called Normal Place, which was actually pretty. It was okay. It did pretty well considering the limited budget and the scope of what we were doing. We planned to scale if it was wildly successful. It was about as successful as I thought it was going to be.
Okay.
But getting work from people and getting people to be involved in that, when we had resources, we had a structure, we had a way to get their product to market, but we were going to run on a profit split, was impossible.
Right.
It was nobody wanted a bar of it, and probably rightly so, because really what we were offering them as a profit split was a split of /fuck all, really. Online shows, no one really knew what they were. and sure, they would have got like a higher level of support, but like, yeah, it's not that useful.
Yeah, bit of insecurity.
But once we had funding that we could pay people, it made such an enormous difference.
Absolutely.
And it sounds dumb, but that was an enormous teachable moment for me. It was like, oh, fuck, like, actually, like, this thing, like, because I am often intrinsically motivated to do projects for artistic reasons.
Yeah.
Especially in the comedy space.
Yeah.
People are not. They'll do it. They won't do it for artistic reasons. They might do it for relationship reasons.
Sure.
But even then, they'll do it once.
Yeah.
And they won't do something with a professional risk attached to it like that. But they'll come and do a gig for me somewhere if I'm starting a new room, right?
Sure.
But they won't, like, I'm going to make an electronic version of my show with, like, doing stand-up comedy to no audience. You know, like...
They have limitations. But I know what you're talking about, and I've done love jobs, you know, and all those things. And there is, you know, like, yeah, the money would be good, but I've done gigs for free just to do them.
I still do it. I mean, I do it as a matter of, like, I want to do them. You know, I want to be doing gigs, you know, like with, if a local band has a CD launch or something.
Sure.
I want to be able to support that. It's one of the nicest things. Like, those little community gigs are the nicest things.
And what else you got to do that day?
Oh, and like, like why are you in it as well? Because, you know, like, the best paid gigs, like, I can tell you, my experience is that sold out shows are mostly the fucking worst. Like, I've had, when I sell out especially the DJ show, but also the cabaret show, actually especially the cabaret show, holy shit. People who plan to go and see things are a very specific kind of audience as well.
Right.
Like, they have the money and disposable income, you know, disposable money to be able to go, I'm going to slam down, even if, let's say it's a $30 ticket, right? I'm going to slam down $30 for one ticket, or, you know, $60 for two or whatever in advance. Whereas, like, more... And those people have, like, jobs. Yeah. They have 9-to-5 jobs. Yeah. They have lives. You're not getting the student audience or people with alternative lifestyles in that figure mostly. So, who are the people mostly that I want to play to most of the time, or I need a good bunch of them to make the show make sense to the other people. But yeah, like, it's oh no, I lost my train of thought. But like it's, you don't, God, what the fuck were we talking about? Hi. If I haven't mentioned it, I did mention it casually a couple of times. I have ADHD, which means that I can go on wild flights of fancy that are very, very useful.
Well, we were talking about, I mentioned, you know, working in a different sort of more organisational capacity or virtually, you know.
Oh, right.
That's where I was going.
Anyway. Yeah. And then, and we were talking about free shows and why we do them.
Free shows.
That's right.
Love jobs.
Yeah. So yeah, I will do a love job, as you put it, because I want that audience connection. Like, I'm playing Yardstock. It's local punks put on this backyard gig.
Yeah, I love it.
It's great. You go around like 4 different backyards and there's different bands, and I'm playing it. I get no money for it. I'm playing with the awesomest bands, and like the people that go
great gig.
Are so much fun. And that's what I want to be doing. And from that, I mean, the thing is, I can't remember who said it, but I was listening to some actually pretty shitty podcast the other day, but the one thing they said was that if you're generating value in a community, someone will pay you eventually. Now, in Perth, my experience is, no, they fucking won't.
No, they won't.
But also, people's, like that brand building and value for yourself, like even if you're looking at it on that metric, it's worth doing that stuff. But also just for yourself, because I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't have anything financially really to show for it. All I have is having a nice time. Yeah. So
I kind of look at it a bit like that, where I'm like, well, you know, time is not, you know, time runs out all the time.
Yeah.
And now, I want to be doing something that's, you know, organised and smooth and all that kind of thing. But if there's an opportunity for me to do something cool and you know, raise a few smiles, or I don't know, it depends. But yeah, I've spun records for free just so I could meet the band.
Yeah, totally.
You know?
I've done that heaps.
You know?
But yeah, I mean, it also comes back like to a bit what we were talking about, or what I was ranting about earlier.
Sure.
About outdated thinking in the art space.
Yeah.
Where in not all businesses, but but mining businesses in particular like to create the illusion that they think this way, and that's an indicator of how prevalent this thinking has become. This idea of triple bottom line economics, right? Which is focusing on the outcomes of people, planet, and profit rather than just profit. People being, you would also, in our case, include your cultural impact, which is super important. That's also another reason I'm playing next weekend, is that, I want to be part of that scene. And I can't, and the cost of entry of having that identification is actually doing shit in it, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah. And the relationships that I'll build from that as well are really important.
Connections.
Yeah.
Yeah. Networking. That's where I see volunteering opportunities as well. Is get involved and see what doors open.
Yeah, but in terms of pitching that to other people, though, I think you're right. I think in the arts we can think maybe our opportunity. We know what those opportunities lead to, right?
Yeah.
But it comes back to that structure thing we were talking about before, where it's actually here are the concrete outcomes that you are going to get from this.
Sure.
As though you're offering an internship, I reckon. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately because I've been because literally listeners, Ivan knows this, but listeners won't. My world pretty much got burnt down this year a little bit. I've been divorced. My business has fallen apart. Which is actually really nice. It's like this raised earth thing where I have to figure out how to rebuild what I'm doing, right? But one of the things is how do I do the thing I was saying before of scaling a one-person business? And it's actually, I have to really look at how I do those motivational things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, strategies. I think they're important, and if you're going to do something for nothing, DJing is one thing, but yeah, just putting yourself in, a situation where, your effort may be acknowledged and, I've always been this might open a door,
Yeah.
and even if it didn't, whatever,
How could, with your stuff, right? How could you, let's say with your film festival that you've got coming up, Ivan's running the Perth Underground Film Festival.
Correct.
So if you've got, because the thing with motivation is that, you can get someone to DJ because it's fun, right? But, say you've got to get people to run your back of house box office. At that point, I would be looking at, how can I motivate them? What actually, because that is a shit job that everybody hates doing. How do I make that cool that they will fucking love it because they get this?
Well, in answer to that, there won't be one because it'll be a cashless.
Yeah, totally.
Now,
I'm talking hypothetically.
But let's say back in the day when I did use door girls, I paid them properly.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
because it is a shit job.
Also, otherwise they'll steal from the till.
Well, I only employed people I could trust as well. But sometimes you'll be putting your trust in that sector into the venue.
Yeah.
Total strangers handling your money.
Yeah.
Most people are all right, I had an incident years ago at the Heidi when they let me put DJs on in the TAB room.
Right.
and the money got taken there. And it wasn't that much, but, whatever.
But not that much in the arts is a lot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, I paid my door people well.
Yeah, good.
And they did a great job. And they would always say yes to my work.
Yeah.
Because it's that value. But, there are or were a lot of operators that would rather not pay you. And that sucked. Wisdom and advice.
I've kind of sprinkled it in. I guess the biggest wisdom that I haven't mentioned just randomly would be that is this idea of self-forgiveness. If you're working in the arts and event space, particularly playing with your own money, like I said before, I lost 20k in Edinburgh. That was real hard to deal with. And And it's hard. I've had a few other financial apocalypses like that. I had a little run of them, like before the pandemic, that were quite hard to deal with and made me feel like maybe my skills were pretty shitty.
Right.
But actually, like, I had just taken a series of risks that hadn't paid off in amidst a bunch of other success.
Right.
So actually, just before the pandemic happened, I had so Crap Music Rave Party had been going great guns, but I'd been managing it in the way that you manage things like Perth mining boom style. There's all this revenue coming in, you don't have to think about it too much, right?
Right.
And then, so I was doing an arts residency in Malaysia, and I'd planned to do, there's a venue I like in Christchurch called Wonder Bar where I was doing New Year's. So, and my son was staying with his grandparents, like my mother-in-law in Victoria. So I arranged this thing where I was going to go do Christchurch and then Wellington and Auckland, then fly to pick him up in Melbourne, and then fly to Kuala Lumpur, where I would do the final week of this arts residency. I'd broken up into 3 trips, and Alicia would join me for a week, a week after that, and we'd have a holiday and we'd come back. Except that, although, well, for some reason the Christchurch New Year's gig, even though that's a market that I always sell out, didn't sell out that time. And the other gigs, because it was pre-New Year's and just post-New Year's, didn't do very well either, even though they were really good markets for me and usually quite predictable. So they died. So I had this bizarre situation where I got to Kuala Lumpur and had to do an arts residency, but that was really supposed to be a holiday, and had to cancel our holiday while we were on the holiday already. So that happened, but it was absolutely devastating.
Right.
It was like an atomic bomb went off in my life at that point, right?
Yeah.
But also that was in amidst, me doing this incredible arts residency in Malaysia, Crap Rave having done so well in New Zealand, and things being so busy and so successful that this ridiculous concept that really should have been very time intensive, I just hadn't even had the time to notice that I'd only half planned,
Yeah.
So, yeah, in hindsight, I look at that, and I wrote this horrible song for a show that I put together for the year after that, which the show I was writing in Kuala Lumpur, called A Magic Trick, that I haven't recorded, and is actually deleted from that show because it is so self-loathing about that situation.
Yeah, right.
That basically I had done a magic trick of, look, it looks like I'm doing everything fine and I'm okay, but look, it's magic, everything's fallen apart.
Illusion.
And I was trying to be dark and funny, but really it was like, dude, I watched the video back a week after the show was run, and I was like, dude, give yourself a break. So I guess what I'm saying is give yourself a break. You're going to have these big failures working in arts and events, and they're going to feel like they define you, but actually, your intrinsic skill and the things that you develop and the things that you're passionate about and your successes define you. The failures are just things that happen along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And value yourself. Put a price tag.
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to get down to bare basics, you shouldn't be working for less than $25 an hour.
Yeah, but also even if you are working for yourself, you are probably a really great business person. Yeah. And if you're working in the arts, you are doing everything on extreme emperor level difficulty.
Well, I don't know if that's still the same now, but it definitely was the tune we danced to.
No, I think it's definitely, I see it.
Okay.
I see people that, I'm not just talking about myself here.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong, a ninja.
Yeah.
But especially because a lot of my roles, I have produced fringe venues, which my approach to making them successful has been to mentor people in how to approach the market. And in talking to those people, often it's a case of reminding them that they have, that they've done Edinburgh for X amount of years, for example.
Sure.
They've sharpened their brain.
Yep.
Or even music industry people, have to constantly navigate a complex landscape, product differentiate in a way that, honestly, any other industry, their brains just implode. I've seen it happen in class at uni where you're like, okay, well, let's apply this to the arts industry where I work. And the problems that we have to solve with the resources that we have are just boggling for most people.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So be kind to yourself, because you are probably fucking amazing. And if the arts were valued in the way that they should be, you'd be earning like crazy, like, Gina money.
Yeah, I'm just skeptical because of the whole corporate shift, and people aren't sort of, as I said, safety nets, which is great.
You're buying into other people's perception of value at that point,
right? Rather
than the actual value, right?
Sure.
Because actually, you're a prime example of somebody who has that level of expertise and that level of thing. Where, like, if you were to be working in if your expertise was in a different sector, you'd be making crazy money.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like if you were doing arts and events, or events for, or even an Indigenous arts curatorship role at Rio Tinto, for example, you would be earning 100K plus.
Yeah.
Well, more than that, actually.
Yeah.
So don't buy into other people's. I guess what I'm saying is, don't buy into other people's perceptions of value, because that is all grounded in the fact that the arts have been devalued, particularly in this country, but worldwide over a long period of time.
Yeah, well, let's hope that all changes. Well, let's talk about the future.
Sure.
How's it looking? Let's not talk internationally.
Well, so as of the time of recording, Western Australia is about to lift all restrictions effectively on Friday.
Yes, I'm looking forward to not wearing a mask.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm going to a gig on Friday, and I will still be wearing a mask.
Okay.
Because the stats on it are pretty clear to me. And actually, to me, in the same way that GPs were a little upset about this, I think artists should be upset as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's actually putting us into danger.
Risk.
Yeah, it's increasing our infection risk, and when we get and infection risk, even if we get mild COVID, increases our overall risk exposure.
Well, you are quite at risk given the nature of your performance.
Yeah.
So, there's lots of contact.
Yeah. So I have to be careful in the way that I schedule myself in that way. And I've had to change a lot of things. I didn't, like, for example, the festival I played on the weekend, I used to crowd surf at the end of my cabaret sets, as I have a song that was kind of a traditional song that I would play, and it includes this shtick where it's like a guided thing where an audience that don't think they're going to crowd surf you will crowd surf you. And it works beautifully and it's lovely, but it's just not tenable right now.
No.
So now I have a song called Touch My Body, where, and it was the first time it actually worked. I wrap myself in Glad Wrap, and I give out gloves to the audience and implore them to touch my body.
It's extremely sanitizing.
Yeah. But, it's still got risk to it.
Sure.
Obviously, it's mostly a joke more than a safety measure to an extent, but it's also... But it is also a risk reduction. It does significantly reduce my exposure. But yeah, I mean, it's put a hold on, so Crap Music Rave Party in particular. This DJ show I do is most of the time my aim in that show is to be the biggest dickhead in the room, which involves running around the entire space and dancing with people and just hyperactively interacting with the audience. As a clowning show. I'm doing some events, but like I did a wedding 2 weeks ago, half of the wedding, including the bride and groom, luckily none of the old people got COVID.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it's like, oh, well, actually we're not there yet. My risk exposure is still enormous. And I don't have... And the insurance... So in Western Australia, we're lucky to a limited extent that we have events insurance here, although it's very slow to pay out. I just got paid out for... Fringe World last year, which was February last year.
I could imagine the process, but at least it's come through.
At least it exists, though, and it allows some certainty. We don't have any interstate or international touring funding. There's no national funding for it because the Prime Minister himself said that actually the arts industry is resilient by itself. We don't need insurance.
Yes, well...
So, but yeah, I can't at the moment take a risk and be like, even though New Zealand's my biggest market, well, I guess I'll go and do, because the great thing about New Zealand, you can go and do, let's say, I can do a more involved tour there because the regional markets are much more engaged than they are in this country. But, you can do the three main cities. You can do Auckland, Wellington, Christchurch in a week.
Okay.
And bang out some cash, right?
Cool.
But I can't really do that at the moment because then I'm subject to Australia and New Zealand's varying rules. And possible outbreaks. And I don't have the capital to just kind of go, okay.
Sure.
And it's the same with interstate touring. It's the same with even putting on, Fringe World Festival, I lost a week at the start this year because I had a cold, basically.
Right.
And because we weren't doing rat testing at that time, I had to wait for a PCR test to come back, which cut out my entire opening weekend, which was half of the shows that I had booked at that point. I fixed it. It was fine. I had an okay time. But, it was just, the fact... It's actually, I think, worse right now for artists and events producers than it was a year ago. Because a year ago we still had JobKeeper. We still had public visibility of the difficulties that we're having. And now everything feels so invisible. And I've seen, it's been this palpable growing of invisibility over the last year of the fact that everybody thinks everything's normal and back to being okay. And actually it's just getting more and more fucked. There's more and more, there's still the same risk, especially in WA where if you're not from WA, well, you just wouldn't have been able to come here for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
We closed our borders. We had no COVID. So COVID risk was quite low. It's just a difficult market to work in. So there's no money to make. But it's a weird, risky time.
I always refine what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Need to sit back, review, refine. Because if you don't change with the times, not everyone can survive.
Yeah.
So I'm more into sort of trying to stop cool from dying. Because I think cool is dying.
Yeah.
Also, pinch alternative culture to new audiences. We come from that background where alternative culture was pretty fucking, prominent in this town anyway.
Yeah.
Things have changed a lot. So I'm trying to still do what I do, but raise the level of appeal, quality, and all those sort of things to try and spark the interest of
broader public.
Yeah, but not only that, but corporate companies or companies and organisations and even government or councils that wouldn't necessarily take.
Yeah,
it's not a risk; it's just different.
No, but it is a risk. I mean, it's reputational risk for them.
Well, the council approved my grant to do George Mellier's, and the majority of people that went to that were all from here, from where I live, and that was something that this community had never engaged in any kind of alternative culture.
Yeah.
It's always, when councils spend money on the community, it's face painting, some cover band, and it's all very mainstream and safe,
Yeah.
But we don't have to keep those formulas to lessen the risk. It's introduce something left of centre.
Yeah.
That's not offensive or weird. It's just different.
Yeah, I agree.
Just have a different experience.
It's generally we've talked about this before, that it's a misunderstanding of risk to say that, let's say, putting on a big council-driven mainstream cultural event is a less risky affair than putting on independent underground culture, because underground independent operators understand their audience and understand how to bring people in, and often cost a lot less.
The mentality, behind a lot of this funding, especially in council, is keep the families happy.
Yeah.
It's for the kids and the mums.
It's condescension, though, as well, because it's a condescension to thinking that families and mums can't either cope with that kind of culture or don't have a demand for it.
One thing that appealed to people here that went to see my show is that they didn't have to bring their kids. And I think I had an age limit of 12 and over.
Yeah.
Because no child is going to sit through 2 hours of entertainment with headphones on and then analyze it at the end, you know? Like it's
a very adult event.
It's a very adult event. One person did bring their kids and they did exactly what I didn't want them to do, get up and walk around for the whole bloody time. But that was just one, you know, but it proved my point that, I made the right decision. But, you know, council funding bodies just look around the corner. You know, just like those street festivals I used to work at. I used to call them the festivals of absolutely bloody everything.
Council arts departments largely have different outcomes in mind than what we think as artists and producers that they should.
Sure, but they also have pretty ordinary ideas.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about it is that it isn't data-driven at all, right? So when I was doing the Midlandia program, which was 2 theatres out in Midland, which is in the outer suburbs of Perth, it was bringing fringe festival artists to an outer suburban audience, which, as it turns out, is something I really like doing. The program was full of stuff that you would not normally see in that kind of program. Because I know that because when it was tried to be copied by other councils, it would tend to be like mainstream fringe festival fare, a lot of circus, a lot of family-friendly kind of stuff. And actually, that's not what people necessarily want. And in Midland, you could look at... Midland's got a bad reputation because the inner city of it is very working class and kind of like, I don't know, like a Mike Lee kind of like a version of working class hell, right?
Right.
But like outside of that, there's a lot of money. There's a wine region next to it.
Sure.
There's a lot of people with a lot of cultural literacy in that area, and so I did my programming based on an understanding of that kind of cultural literacy, but also understanding that there's also a fucking pack of bogans.
Yeah.
But even within that, you can push. You've got a responsibility as a curator to push them. So it's like, okay, So one of my favourite programming decisions that paid off very well the first year was that we had Steady Eddie come and do things. It was a recognisable name to the Bogans, right? And it's like a pretty suburban comedy club friendly act, right?
Yep.
It has a disability and his comedy is about bringing visibility to that disability. So it's got a power to it. It's still a risky thing in a sense. Most council, I think, people would look at that and be like, "Oh, that's cool." But like, I'm a bit scared I'll get letters, Yeah. And you can't be scared of letters.
The fear, there is no fear. Like, what's the, like, you'd rather sort of, fund this interesting project, which, would make is like groundbreaking. It's not offensive, it's just risque, and we're all bloody adults. But everyone in the, on the council side of things are just always scared of offending the public or scared of, scared of fucking what?
But they avoid, by doing that as well, they avoid, if you're just programming like City of Coburn where you
they keep it safe.
We'll just do, like these kind of Eskimo Joe kind of events where they put them in the park and there's heaps of money. And
bands in parks.
Yeah. But like, if you're just doing that, you're avoiding creating conversation in your community and avoiding all the positive things that the arts do. Like, it's not really arts at that point. It is just an event. It is just the gathering of people, and you're going to get the positives of that.
Sure.
But you're not going to get people critically thinking and having discussions around issues or being educated or like being challenged.
It's just a nice day out or whatever.
Yeah. And there's real value to that. Like,
yeah, look, I can always see, like, money being spent on why. And always think, well, what did they reject in place of that? Which was probably something pretty fucking cool.
And further to that, what didn't even ask?
Yeah.
You've really, like, if you're in those roles, you've really got to put the work in to be developing contacts and developing and engaging with your community, like, as a...
Well, that's...
having a conversation with a curator.
I'm constantly up against these people in these jobs that just don't have artistic bone in their bloody body and won't take the risks, our events and our marketing really stands out, because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
In our sort of...
But the funny thing is that I think that pigeonholes as well for the people that we're working, for the kind of like council workers that you're talking about. There's a perception that, for example, with my work, that I've had to break through over years and years, and I still face this.
Yeah.
I mean, I cannot get an arts job in this city.
Tell me about it.
I mean, I thought I was paranoid, and I won't get into it on here.
No,
it was
no.
Wow. I just had somebody do absolute fucking backflips not to give me an arts job in a spectacular way.
Right.
And it's partially because of perceived reputational risk.
Sure.
Because I am a sometimes controversial person.
Sure.
But it's mostly because they see what I do, and they see it within the very limited frame of what I've already done, or what they're aware of what I've already done.
Sure, yeah.
Rather than looking at, well, why was it done that way, and can that understanding of branding and of like project management and all these different things be applied in a different way, in a contextually appropriate way. You know?
Well, look, I pulled off a great gig for my local council, and I did the acquittal. Like, it was a huge success. And the one person that gave me the grant, did the calculations, saw who I was, my CV and the whole thing, and went, this is viable.
Sure.
And it's different, And then that particular person went on maternity leave.
Yeah.
And then I put in another 2 applications for funding for 2 different film festivals. And, the process was just really lengthy, like getting any kind of feedback. And then a whole bunch of shit happened that I'm not going to go into. But at the end of the day, when they finally sent me your applications were unsuccessful, I don't think they read my attachments, like the report I put together and the evidence and all that kind of stuff. They basically just wrote some really lame feedback, like the limited text you have on an online application.
Yeah.
That's what they read.
But also,
they didn't go into. But so two film festival concepts rejected, and then they funded their own.
Yeah.
But
at that point, I think there's a case to be made for. I'm a big believer in upwards accountability, and I think as artists and producers, we need to do more of it. Like, and in a case like that, where they've taken your IP for a start,
pretty much.
More importantly, each council will have an arts and cultural document.
Sure.
And most of them talk about community capacity building, right?
Yeah.
And when you break down the way that, we're talking about like the way that councils will do more family-friendly events, right?
Sure.
Rather than like actually engaging in the arts space.
Yeah.
Most of their rationale for that is around community capacity building, and basically like the idea that people don't like the arts, kind of comes to, if you unpack it a bit, it's like, it's as if they think people don't like the arts, and that they need to have an exposure to it that's low pressure enough that they get tricked into being at an arts event, right?
Sure.
And we know that that's not the case.
It's not the case.
We know that statistically, like, Australians engage in the arts, I think, a bit more than they engage in sport, from memory. Like, I don't have the figures on that, but like, there's a stat floating around on that. But like, something that we need to do more as with people in these roles is be going back to them and saying, look, you haven't funded me for this. I'm an independent producer in the community. I've had success. I've demonstrated that success. Here is the outcomes that you're talking about around community capacity building. You need to be building my capacity to deliver events, because actually, like, the income, the investment that you put in me as an independent practitioner working in insert council name here is actually not just based on the outcomes that you're getting from this project. Once this is established, you're going to have, in the medium term, an events practitioner who is able to inject all kinds of culture at almost zero cost to the council, right? Even if it wasn't happening in the area, the fact that your office is in the area would still be a massive get for that council on many, many of their outcomes.
Yeah.
And we need to start calling their bullshit. Like, these approaches are like not grounded in fact. And when you start talking fact and you hold statistics and you hold like people to actually account for the actual truth as we understand it, they have to argue, and if they don't, then you can take it to council.
Yeah.
You know? Also, like, I mean, it's harder in WA because, like, it's harder on a broader level when it gets to state or federal funding because the arts funding bodies don't have huge amounts of accountability, and there isn't an interest from above them for accountability.
Yeah, yeah. So last year I did a regional show, and anyway, we put on this really unique show, you know, and he was, you know, promised some funding, and then in the process, the arts officer resigned, you know, was leaving anyway and resigned, and someone else came, and it all got like mucked up.
Yeah.
And ended up with no funding.
Right.
But we put on like the most incredible, unique thing that these people have ever seen.
Yeah.
And they all came, all of them. We didn't have enough chairs, but they loved it, you know. But even though like we put on such a great gig and it was really well received, they still didn't cough up.
Yeah.
You know, it's sort of like they use this excuse of this transition going on, that everything got sort of messed up and then we packed up and left.
Even that, right? Like in terms of on a policy level.
Exactly.
Like at the point at which, there's that kind of the COVID kind of period. I mean, there's some councils that reacted to that really well. Like, I mean, I've heard other issues with them, but the City of Stirling, for example, put out a grants application program that could go to any artist in any council area. Okay. Which I thought was incredible.
Yeah.
And the kind of generosity and awareness that like a healthy sector around the city helps even the City of Stirling, which is the main council area.
Just ease some of those restrictions.
Yeah.
And share the love.
But it also meant that they then had many, you know,
a lot of applicants.
Field leading artists creating work for their residents for what really amounts to a bargain basement cost as well. So it's like everybody wins, and if there's a sustainable arts industry, then there's more stuff that can happen in the City of Stirling. But I don't see that thinking in many other councils in this city in particular, and it's or just strategic thinking. I see a lot of tactical thinking. Like single events based, you know, people have their favourite programs that they run, but they do not add up into an overall strategy for either the kind of what I think are fairly vacuous kind of community capacity building goals, vacuous in the way that they're expressed and what they actually want to do as compared to the actual power of the art. And they certainly don't add to like creating a vibrant arts ecosystem in those council areas. So I don't know. I really I wish the whole thing would just change.
Oh look, it's going to have to, but also it's this tradition of like just, you know, plonking ordinary people in unique positions. You know, funding art requires understanding. It doesn't require anything else really. And if you don't understand how to program, how to schedule and all that. But the thing is, I meet people in these roles and they all have corporate mainstream backgrounds.
Yeah.
It's mainstream, you know, and that they've got budgets, they've got teams, they've got everything, you know. So they don't have that understanding where you and I have, where, you know, we have nothing and we built this, you know, come and see it.
Yeah.
There's none of that. So unless the right people are hired to do the right job. You know.
And that's not to say that people who don't have that experience can't do a great job.
Well, no, but you have to have an understanding.
Yeah, and everyone's got to start somewhere. But I think what we're getting at, or what you're getting at here, is that has become the norm. That's not like it's more abnormal. I mean, it's very difficult, like I was saying before, for me to even get a job, despite having run award-winning council programs. For me to get a job in the arts in Perth is very difficult, which is fascinating to me. I'm
in the same boat. I just got 3 diplomas to back myself up. And I had, out of all the jobs, I go for jobs, you know, a lot. I meet my Centrelink obligations very early. And I don't know if that's going to shoot me in the foot. But, but I do the effort and I customize.
Sure.
I have templates for all this. I'm fucking onto it, man. You know,
Okay.
I had one job interview over 3 weeks ago, Zoomed. I killed it, like just nailed it, went really well. And I followed them up 2 days ago and they forgot to tell me that they'd filled the position already, you know? And I'm like, well, what kind of professionalism am I up against here? Like, are you only hiring people that forget to do things, or?
Don't get me started.
Yeah.
It's been a ride.
So you know, as far as like the future goes, well, I'm trying to get Puff off the ground, and that's been a process of evolution since October.
Yeah.
And so now I just put in a grant to hopefully launch it next year. But that grant's going to take 3 months to resolve. So now I'm just coming up with other things to do. You know, I think you and I are pretty resourceful people. We're quite resilient and all of the things. But I'm at a place where it's like I just have to like make my own job, and I did, and I have.
Yeah.
I've been, you know, you and I have freelanced for years.
Yeah.
You know, but you know,
I mean, I've quit showbiz numerous times in the last 2 years, and it's always come back to assessing to a point where I assess the value I'm able to create by myself versus what I can do in a job, and the likelihood of me getting that job, you know, and that job being a place that I can contribute. Keywords,
transferable skills.
Yeah.
You know,
but like, yeah, realistically, it always comes back to me creating my own work again. And I'm fine with that. I'm kind of like, I mean, to be honest, it's reassuring in a way because that's what I want to be doing. The fact that it sucks at the moment, like.
Yeah,
sucks,
same.
But it's like, and it's hard, but
we're really good at what we do.
Yeah, and I prefer it. It's important to me. So I'm hoping that I can. I have this kind of raised ground, got to build it from scratch situation at the moment, and actually, once you get past the grief of that, of the things that you have lost, it is an incredibly powerful place to be. It's actually very, very exciting.
Oh yeah, I can relate to that.
Yeah,
getting back on your feet. Is a fucking massive success.
Yeah.
You know.
But also it just means that, you know, like I was saying before, you know, like all the shitty systems or lack of systems, all the this just evolved over time and now it sucks of the way that I've been working before.
Right.
I can actually address that now.
Yeah.
And I can figure out actually where I'm going. And it's fun. Yeah.
Okay. Well, awesome to talk with you, and I think your insight into this industry is valuable, and that's what I'm just hoping to get out of this podcast. Okay, well, what have you got coming up?
Slowly mixing really an album of songs I wrote during the pandemic called "Have a Bath with Me."
Cool.
Which was a show that I made to do in my bathtub to an audience of people who were also in their bathtub. And that's really a dumb record. Like, it's intentionally stupid, and it's actually I make very confusing late night fringe alternative cabaret shows, and that one has been the most consistently confusing for people because usually my bizarreness is attached to a point.
Yes.
In this particular case, this is a COVID brain melt, and it just weirds people the fuck out. And so it's going to be a great record. I already made a film out of it. So like I'm mixing the record and having to re-record vocals, but for something that I already have music videos for. It's like shitting bricks, but it's getting done. It's sounding really good.
Cool.
Yeah, and then building up this acoustic show, which I'm doing at the Perth International Cabaret Festival in a weird dungeon side room at His Majesty's Theatre.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think I've been in that room many years ago.
Yeah.
I think that's where Revelation started.
It might be.
Downstairs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the great thing about that show is that I've built it intentionally because I didn't know what was happening.
Sure.
I knew I didn't have necessarily that much time. If I was maybe going to have to get a job that I might want to scale down. So I built this show where I can bring 20 to 40 camp chairs, like $5 camping barbecue chairs from Bunnings into a space. I've got a big fake fireplace. I play ukulele through my busking app, and I sing unamplified because I can project because I am a theatre trained professional. And I play a Boy Scout leader who's going through a midlife crisis, which, as it turns out, is pretty true. And
art imitating life.
Yeah, but that show's ripper, and so I'm going to do that. Cool. Imagine, and hopefully just hire the weirdest community halls in WA and tour it into regional communities. I only have to sell 20 to 40 tickets.
Sure.
And it's done.
Yeah.
Which is just real exciting. Like, I want to be big and collie, you know?
Yeah. Thomas Ford, you're a wonderful man.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Look at you. You're amazing.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
And thanks for listening. And tune in for the next episode. See ya.
Hooroo.